Bungie's Destiny franchise has created iconic weaponry over the years. One in particular has a special feel to it, a sense of urgency and immersion when you're wielding it. Today we tell the tale of the last word through the lens of the Crucible over its lifespan. This isn't just any piece of steel, it's been a pinnacle from Tex Mechanica within PvP, and some wonder if it all began with a little Easter egg in 2009. You're sitting on your couch with a bag of chips on your left, a controller in hand, and complete focus on the new 1080p TV that you just got. Halo 3's ODST boots up, and there's a little sign on the wall. It reads Destiny Awaits with a symbol oddly similar to that of our franchise favorite flipped upside down. Little did we know this would lead to an amazing journey for millions of us, including the jaw-dropping experience of wielding the last word. There were conference presentations at GDC, articles being written, but one podcast gave a sneak peek when one of Bungie's lead artists was asked in September of 2013 what their favorite weapon was. He responded saying the last word, a weapon drawing inspiration from Wild West-style John Ford movies. Some even go as far as wondering if this 1929 piece by Elmer Keith played a role, but at this point all we knew is it was considered to be a hero's weapon in stark contrast to the evil hand cannon named Thorn. Just 1 month later, Karen Olava, a well-known cosplayer, questioned Bungie about the cover page of that very podcast. Was this our first glimpse at the two-tapping glitch machine? By the time summer of 2014 rolled around, images had been found confirming its look, and the incredible prototypers in the community went to work, such as Sloan Hood and Eric Newgard. Additionally, Destiny's beta was released, and although it of course didn't showcase the last word specifically, hand cannons were actually awful. So much so that Bungie felt they better act quick and buff them big time to prove that they could compete in the Crucible when launch day arrives. As trailers continued to ship to our social media, the hype around Destiny was rising, and if you had a keen eye, one trailer in particular was rather special. There it was, the fan-firing work of art from Tex Mechanica twirling around a golden gun's hand. Bungie was not kidding about hand cannons being able to compete at release. They were lethal, but on day one, you only had two ways to obtain an exotic hand cannon. One method was to complete a ton of daily bounties and pray to RNGesus that you'd strike gold, converting one of them into a special exotic bounty. This would then give you 3 quest lines to choose for one weapon, but none of them were for the last word, which meant it had to drop from absolute luck in completing random activities in the game. This created an extreme rarity to acquiring it, and I'm not actually sure if it even dropped in the first couple weeks because of this TWAB on September 26th. Deej posted a mini interview with his fellow coworkers where it said, "You should make a semi-auto handgun, Matt," and they replied, "Would you consider a semi-auto hand cannon as your last word in your personal defense?" Suddenly after this post, we began to see it out in the wild. To illustrate its rarity, take a look at this clip from a familiar face we now know as Leopard.
I love you, but I hate you. That guy got kicked out, dude. Cocaine loser.
Drops were so special, people probably had to buy a new mic for their console.
Look what I got!
Oh my gosh! You didn't actually.
Now, due to this rarity in the beginning, any questions around overpowered weapons were actually aimed at the Hawkmoon or Thorn because there's a tendency for us to focus on usage rates rather than true ability, not to mention how annoying that burn was on screen. Now wouldn't you know it, in November of 2014, our friendly neighborhood tentacle showed up with a special surprise. Social media on the game wasn't quite what we're used to today, and although some folks tried yelling to the masses to buy this thing, it didn't reach too many people. And even if it did, who had 23 strange coins back then, am I right? 3 months after launch, some reviews started to trickle in, and these types of videos weren't as bold as they are now. People didn't have a complete grasp on what the meta was, and when it came to new weapons, their perks didn't actually activate until you'd unlocked them by gaining experience by using them in the game, and this took a long time. Your first impression wouldn't be anywhere near what it was once it was fully upgraded. Let's take a look at what it had. The first column had a symbol showing it was kinetic and another one saying fanfire, which essentially meant full auto, but in this case at 225 RPM, substantially faster than its competitors. The second column had your barrels. Believe it or not, back then, barrels could actually change the damage of your gun, and boy does it get spicy for this one, but we'll come back to that. Option 1 was soft ballistics, which gave nice recoil in exchange for 5% less damage than the base. Next was smart drift control, keeping the base damage at regular, but only so-so recoil. And then lastly was aggressive ballistics, giving 10% extra damage at the cost of bad recoil and less range. Moving on, we had a hip fire perk, which gave better accuracy cones when firing from the hip instead of aiming down sights. Then another multi-option column, which had single point sling, giving faster swap speed and even strafe speed as well. High caliber rounds, which we're familiar with today, and perfect balance, a choice to control that difficult recoil. Finally, the actual last word perk. This was the bread and butter of it all. It granted bonus damage on top of the barrel choice you already made if you landed a hit from hip fire. It gave better stability and even a better accuracy cone as well, again, from hip fire. And then if you did happen to hit a headshot, not only were you getting that bonus damage at base, it actually boosted the crit multiplier even further. Sounds kind of wild, but I'll explain all the numbers soon so that you can get a grasp of it. All in all, there was a hilarious mixed feeling and self-contradiction in this weapon. On one hand, everyone felt like, yeah, this is a Wild West weapon meant for up-close engagements with such a low range stat. It's so hard to control because it kicks like a mule that this thing is balanced. But then on the other hand, the range bar back then didn't really seem that indicative of what weapons could do back in Season 1. And as time progressed, people got really good with that recoil. December break is always a thick month for data because so many people have time off from school or work to just dive into video games and improve. And that's exactly what happened with The Last Word. This thing went from never dropping or being seen in the Crucible to being number 7 on the overall usage charts just like that. People were getting used to it, learning that low bar for the range stat wasn't actually holding it back. And earlier, I called it a 2-tapping glitch machine, so let me show you what those numbers are in its damage profile. The base damage was 51 to the body. For reference, that's more than our precious 120s today, but nearly double the RPM. I mentioned that the soft ballistics barrel would subtract 5%, right? So you would actually see 49s on screen if that's the one you picked. A headshot on The Last Word had a crit multiplier of 1.5, so you'd see 73 yellow when you were playing. Don't forget though, that special perk called The Last Word said bonus damage and precision increase, right? If you hip fired, your body shot dealt 59 instead of 49, and then the crit multiplier was actually bumped up to 1.63 instead of 1.5, meaning a headshot would all of a sudden show 96 instead of 73. If you thought that was intense, Smart Drift Control didn't subtract that 5% base impact. So here's what those same numbers look like on that barrel where 2-tapping was born. Going even further was aggressive ballistics having 10% boost to the damage. Imagine a 225 RPM full auto that's hip firing 111s at you, and we haven't even touched the glitch yet. Even with this kind of power, because everyone had the thorn on their account by now from those exotic bounties, and the burn on screen, like I said, was literally soul crushing, all eyes were on that instead. As a result, Bungie did end up nerfing hand cannons across the board, driven vastly by the thorn, but oddly enough, this is where The Last Word's glitch actually started to really shine, so let's talk about it. First, to lay out the basics, when you aim down sights on a weapon, you're pushing out its range. As simple as that. Right now in D2 for example, if I did say 10 damage to someone from the hip, and then I ADS'd my weapon, I would actually do more damage because the damage drop off is being pushed further out. Essentially, aiming down sights gives you a lot more effective range. Reading that Last Word perk, it clearly states the bonus damage and precision boost is supposed to only be from the hip. This is logical because from the hip, you should be hitting less damage because of that damage drop off from how far you are from your opponent. In other words, the perk was supposed to be a neat little way to counteract that, but as the community continued to grow and use the weapon more and more, people started to realize that this perk would randomly proc even while fully ADS'd, and it wasn't even that rare. Suddenly, you had that damage bonus at full range capability while aiming down sights. Take a look at Exhibit A from our good friend Camicakes.
Here is Exhibit A. Watch how fast this guy drops.
You had incredible damage potential at ranges you weren't supposed to achieve. As the year progressed, so did people's skill level. Oftentimes, a weapon doesn't seem nearly as good as it is because people don't know all the ins and outs yet, but once they do figure it out, like that pistol in Halo 1, if anyone knows what I'm talking about, the floodgates open. Usage for the last word bumped all the way up to number 2 in the charts, but there was a reason why it didn't quite take over number 1. A little term we began to call ghost bullets got in the way. Back in February of that very same year, Bungie actually nerfed hand cannon initial accuracy cones. I've mentioned that word twice now, and what a cone dictates is whether or not the bullet's going to go where you're aiming. Believe it or not, it can stray off and it actually gets worse with a lower range stat. But with Xur selling the last word 3 times in early 2015 and the sheer Wild West dominance that it had, the numbers just kept growing and growing, and this is when Bungie gave a sneak peek into what the infamous patch 2.0 would be at the launch of Taken King. Bungie's first massive expansion hits in September of 2015. A new meta was arising. Thorn was literally sunset in the Taken King, but fortunately for the Wild West fans of The Last Word, it was brought up to light level and simply refreshed in year 2. There was something about it though, it did not feel the same, and here's why. First off, the blanket changes that they made to hand cannons. They all had their damage drop-offs shortened, their accuracy cones widened, opening the door to those ghost bullets even more. And lastly, the zoom was decreased, which also amplifies that very same issue because zoom typically shrinks that accuracy cone. Hit registrations would start to drop off, and if that wasn't enough, The Last Word had some changes of its own. Right out the gate, just by looking at the stats, base, range, and stability were brought down. This was a double whammy on those accuracy cones because as range goes down, those get worse. And with controllers on 30 FPS, the recoil was quite a bit different with less stability. Next up, they tweaked the barrels. Soft ballistics actually got a slight buff as it no longer reduced the impact by 5%, but rather 2.5%. Smart drift control was left alone, but aggressive ballistics, however, only granted 5% bonus damage instead of that 10% from before, and now it tanked your range and stability even more. If you're seeing a pattern here, there was a number of stacking hits that were made to this weapon. Moving on, they actually fixed that glitch from earlier too. You could no longer get the Last Word perk damage buff while aiming down sights, which was totally fair, but if you recall, the beauty around that glitch was having that damage potential at ranges only achieved by aiming down sights, so this was another indirect hit to range. In hindsight, it was all likely warranted because of how crazy strong this thing was, but here's how the numbers shook out. 2 of the barrels could still 2-tap just like before, but after patch 2.0, very few people used them. They literally would give up the 2-tap potential because bullets would disintegrate into the abyss thanks to those ghost bullets on such a low range stat. I went into the weeds on this topic a lot more in my Thorn video if you're interested, but basically just imagine hitting a standstill headshot with your reticle but not actually getting anything to register. What I found interesting is that Bungie actually tried to counteract all of those stacked nerfs by buffing the Last Word's hipfire mechanic. They bumped its specific hipfire accuracy and even added aim assist. It was pretty clear that they were trying to steer the community into using it as a Wild West hipfire machine and really just never aim down sights. There were 2 major issues with this though. Number 1, people had been aiming down sights for a full year now, and not only is it pretty tough to break old habits, none of us really had Drewski or Merc to explain all these cones, now did we? Number 2 was the fact that things like Hawksaw were introduced, for example. A pulse meta was starting to develop because your bullets would consistently hit your target and it felt so good. I said it before and I'll say it again. People get used to things. They learn those ins and outs if you give them long enough, and that's exactly what transpired over the next 6 months. People were finally getting the hang of its hipfire recoil, and coupled with a minor buff to those cones in December of 2015, it started to feel like the king was returning. But what happens when usage goes up? The forums start to fill, and nerfs begin to develop around the corner. In April of 2016, they took another look at our favorite Tex Mechanica weapon. First off, aggressive ballistics was changed again, and this time to tank your stability even more than prior. Let's be honest though, at this point everyone was using soft ballistics anyway, so we'll let that fly. The real hit was the iconic perk itself, Last Word. Even with the glitch gone for those 6 months, that 20% damage bonus and crit multiplier boost was just too much, so they toasted it. The new damage profile would look like this. Not only did this officially remove the 2-tap ability for those brave enough to use those barrels, but it literally transformed the time to kill on it. Doing this put the Last Word in kind of an awkward position because on paper you wanted to hip fire for that target acquisition, trying to make sure that your bullets would hit, but the damage drop off was literally infeasible after this patch, so there was no point in hitting shots if they were just going to tickle your opponent anyway. For this reason, it actually did a full circle and went back to basically needing to aim down sights if you wanted to use it. With this patch, we saw another exotic start to really take the game by storm. Can anyone say Mida Multitool? Fall of 2016 rolls around and we enter our final year of Destiny 1 with Rise of Iron.
We have new maps. We always have new maps.
Join me, Guardian, and become an Iron Lord.
Over the course of the year and leading into 2017, sniper mains could continue using the Last Word, but many others would struggle to choose it over the likes of Ice Luna, Palindrome, Grasp of Malak, or Clever Dragon kicking around. That being said, the fanfire favorite maintained its iconic feel and seemed to finally fulfill its forever intended purpose of up-close engagements only. Many months later, after enough community gathering around those ghost bullets, February of 2017 brought that final fix to the issue when Bungie reverted accuracy cones to year 1 values with hotfix 2502. This was an incredible feeling to have your bullets go exactly where you aimed, but I will say at this point going forward, all hands are on deck for Destiny's sequel being released in the fall. With quite the interesting closing meta in Destiny 1, be it with sticky nades and sidearms, many folks had shifted their focus to the new shiny release.
Let's get to it, Guardian.
When Destiny 2 launched, there was a lot of debate right out the gate because of the double primary system. Awe-inspiring 1v3 clutches using a special weapon seemed to have faded away, and many folks went on to grow in other games. However, every single time Bungie would bring back a Destiny 1 exotic to the sequel, all those players who'd left, including myself, would suddenly check and see, was it Thorn? The Last Word? Could it be Hawkmoon? After a full year of riding on the roller coaster that is Destiny 2, a little hint was given on November 27th of 2018 during a Bungie video doc.
So we've got 5 new exotics, including 4 brand new awesome weapons and 1 old favorite.
And of course, today we know that 2 special icons came back in early 2019, but December 3rd's Black Armory trailer would officially reveal the return of our Wild West favorite.
I think we might just have the wares you're looking for.
Did Sir Demetrius go 2 for 2 with his love letters? The excitement was so real, and it's safe to say the Destiny's community and player base began to finally grow as the game progressed. It's January 2019 and it's finally here. No random drop required this time around. The last word made its triumphant return through an exotic quest named The Draw. Straight out of the gate, this hand cannon was extremely good. Of course, it was all sunshine at first thanks to nostalgia, but boy did it garner a lot of attention with its damage profile. Sure, it was nothing like D1, but in this game it was in a league of its own at release, dealing 51 to the body and 68 to the head while maintaining that historic 225 RPM. To be clear, this thing came in with the ability to shut your opponent down in half a second flat, which was nuts given the nature of time to kills back then. It would be an understatement to say it had rave reviews, so let's take a look. The Fanfire perk, same as before, essentially full auto going at a crazy high rounds per minute, but with a twist this time. It brought faster reload and a special accuracy boost with a stacking mechanic. Dealing successive hipfire damage would bump these up to a maximum of 4 stacks shown on screen. Next up were some standard perk nodes which we often see, so I'll jump right to hipfire grip. This of course lines up with the whole story of the last word, giving increased accuracy and stability when firing from the hip, and then textured grip was also very fitting, being that it gives faster handling for nice swap speeds, kinda like that single point sling in Destiny 1. To put this weapon's strength into context, it was so dominant that my little Easter egg earlier on calling it a machine gun was actually the nickname that it earned in 2019. Even if you didn't have spectacular aim, the last word had your back. It had a 0.8 second body shot only time to kill. This is insane. Everyone could use this thing, and with the movement capabilities in Destiny 2 coupled with shotguns, there was finally a strong counter to them using the last word. By springtime, if you weren't using the last word, you were throwing. And I'll never forget a video from Camicakes talking about how if one person would swap to it in Rumble, suddenly the entire lobby had it on moments later. When something is this strong, many Destiny players have PTSD from the constant nerfs back in D1, so we would often ask for other items to be buffed up to its level instead, which I believe is when a little special SMG came to the forefront, isn't it? What was it again? Relux? Circluse? No, wait, Recluse. Yeah, that's it. Even with that being released though, there was something about the last word that just kept it at the top of the food chain. The Scrim community, for example, a community that would love the last word in Destiny 1, had to ban this thing in a competitive setting because it would completely take away from the flow of a match with what it could do. Fast forwarding, a full year of power creep took place since the release of the last word. Things like Recluse, Mountaintop, Mindbenders, Not Forgotten, Revoker, One-Eyed Mask, they all kept trying to be the next best thing in order to maintain that desire to grind new gear. Enough was enough though, and Bungie made an attempt to normalize the last word in February of 2020. This is when a real split began to take place for mouse and keyboard versus controller on it. Diving into the TWAB that some say killed the last word on PC, it was very clear they yet again had an issue with folks aiming down sights, and in particular how forgiving the body shot time to kill was. Here's a look at its new damage profile. So pre-patch you saw that 51 and 68 across the board, right? Well, post-patch the body shot damage was reduced by 24% down to 38. If you were aiming down sights when you hit your headshot, it would only hit for 51, which was the former body shot number from before. Now, if you used it as intended, which seems to be from the hip, having damage drop off, then they would let you hit those 68s to the head, which is pretty strong considering it's coming from a 38 damage base. The split between mouse and keyboard and controller was driven because headshots were surprisingly tougher to land with a mouse. YouTube videos and reviewers began to demonstrate side-by-side comparisons where the reticle would be in the same spot, but on one input it would count as a headshot and on another it wouldn't. After this patch went live, usage on mouse and keyboard absolutely tanked. People on controller would still use it, but with the lower damage profile, it certainly wasn't as popular as it was before. After a few months of that usage clearly decreasing, in May of 2020, Bungie released a new weapon that was like a last word, but it shot 12 bullets at once and in the form of a spread. Felwinter's Lie was released, and I bring this up because soon after came what seemed like a mini attempt to try and combat it old school style. In D1, the last word was every person's way of shutting down a shotgun ape. Maybe hotfix 2813 was a way of helping our little machine gun out after all. They buffed the general hipfire perk quite a bit, extra base aim assist and better fall off distance, plus improved precision angle, meaning you could be more off of your target and still register a headshot. For M&K, it definitely became a little bit nicer to use, but honestly, nothing compared to its release, and it never really caught fire again on this input. Controller folks, however, really started to enjoy it again, even though it had that lower body shot damage. Right around this time, it wasn't too uncommon to see a sniper main rocking the beloved with the last word. Over the course of quite some time, there was a series of recoil changes to a lot of different weapons, all of which would indirectly affect the way the last word felt, meaning it became a little tougher to get your muscle memory on point. It was all aimed at trying to bring controller and M&K closer together because of stability differences, but so far this year has really only had one more tweak to our short-range text mechanica. In late April, Bungie buffed hipfire grip again, which did help out. It had another degree of precision angle, helping that target forgiveness, and a boost to reticle stickiness. As of today, the last word is usable on mouse and keyboard for sure, but there still remains a huge split between the two inputs, and it doesn't help that things like Dead Man's Tale are essentially long-ranged last words out there. We as a community will always seek balance and hope that Bungie can give it to us, but I must say I will forever enjoy the feeling of sniping with a last word, and I have Bungie to thank for creating such an incredible weapon. I continue to use it today, and I think it's safe to say that this thing helped to make Destiny what it is. Thank you to all the content creators from the community footage. Their links can be found in the description below. Thanks to Chocolace and Vastility for helping with the art, and finally Gjerda for working on this project with me. If you're interested in the story of Thorn, I've left a clickable thumbnail on screen. Thank you for watching and have a great day.